In the news from Moscow, reports of a coal miner strike. Certain miners around Russia are striking for back pay they've been waiting for since last October. Also reports of fighting in Chechnya, and member nations of the former Soviet Union prepare for a summit of the Commonwealth of Independent States. This newscast is seen in Russia and throughout parts of the former Soviet Union.
Good evening. In this broadcast, the program Time. Contradictory information comes now not only from hot points where combat is underway. Today, the basic topic is the pan-Russian warning strike. And again, mutually exclusive reports have been arriving. Early this morning from Kuzbassy, Tartas reports that the miners of that region did not join into the protest action. Later, they reported that this was the region which demonstrated the highest strike activity. At this same time, the governor of the region, Mikhail Kisluk, says that only the union workers are on strike and the miners themselves are occupied with their daily tasks. For the eighth day, 76,000 miners of the joint stock company of Rostov-Kul are on strike. 26 mines are at a standstill. In the opinion of the miners, the $32.5 billion received yesterday in order to liquidate the budgetary debt are not capable of significantly changing the crisis situation in the coal industry of the eastern Donbas area. In Primoria, the pan-Russian strike is not joined by the miners of only one company, the Pavlovsky Quarry, because to stop unloading fuel for even a few hours would freeze Vladivostok. All the mines of Vorkuta are operating today on their normal schedules because their 24-hour strike the miners held last Monday. The Volgashorskaya mine, one of the largest in Russia, is not taking part in the strike. Now it's a joint stock association not needing government subsidization. Apart from economic, political demands have been voiced by the miners of the sub-Moscow coal basin. The miners of the Tula mines insist on the resignation of the government and early presidential elections. The Service or Department of Resolving Labor Conflicts under the Ministry of Labor this time did not attempt to prevent this miners' strike. This department, by decision of the government, had constantly been involved in resolving labor disputes with the coal industry workers. However, this time, specialists of the service only followed the situation because the government stated quite often that further delays in salary payments would lead to a social explosion, which would escalate into an all-Russian miners' strike. A correspondent of Tartas received this information. Since the time when, back in July of 1989, the first massive protest of miners forced the miners to be considered as a real force and many political leaders attempted to rally their support, each new action was accompanied with statements that more political dividends from coal-producing regions are no longer possible to squeeze out. However, today's all-Russian warning strike, whose declared objective is for the miners to receive their salaries, reminds one that the elusive miners' card continues to be played. As was stated by the directorship of the Russian coal professional unions, 70 coal mining companies stopped productivity. Overall, 500,000 coal workers are involved in the strike, but those not taking part in the strike are stating the need to resolve the problem of salary in civilized, not forceful methods, are probably going down into the shafts not for the reason of love for union leaders, whom many have been reproached for artificially forming an image of defenders of laborers. The reason for refusing to strike is more prosaic. In many collectives which have become stock ventures, salaries are paid on time. Apart from that, many of those refraining from the strike are those placated by the government's proposed scale of paying back the debt. No matter what, from the point of view of political conjecture, one could not possibly dream up a more inconvenient time to strike for the federal government, but many experts dismiss the view that, on the flood of the miners' protests in Moscow, they are attempting to resolve certain personnel problems. Summarizing somewhat, I will add that according to the agency REA, participating in today's strike were 90% of the companies of the sector. As I have already said, however, regarding the mining strike as well, information received is also contradictory. The Vice Premier Chubais quoted the figure 50%. The Minister of Fuel and the Fuel and Energy sector, Shafranik, feels that 60% of the companies of the sector were involved. Eventually, the matter is not whether it's 50, 45, or 55%. The matter is the issue, and the issue is what can the government do and what What will it do and what it will not do under any circumstances? What can the government and what will it do? The miners have raised several practical questions connected with resolving the non-payment of fines into pension funds, the compulsory medical insurance fund, and special schemes for distributing profit flow on a 50-50 basis, and many other work issues were resolved by Rosugol, Russian Coal, with the Ministry of Finances and the Economics Ministry, and are working on several major additional sources of financing for the coal industry. But what will categorically not happen, and one can state this absolutely definitely, that not through any pressure will I or the government be forced to redistribute money from the social sphere, take the money from teachers, doctors, military servicemen, and under political threat shift it to support the miners. This won't happen under any circumstances. How much has the money did the government already allot to these regions? On the very first day, serious payments were made of 85 billion rubles overall. Half of that went to the Rostov district. The general picture is such. In January, the coal sector received 100 billion rubles from the government. In February, it will receive 6 times more, 600 billion rubles. In March, we will maintain that level. And the last question on the Delivery Switch, you promised to go there to meet personally with the miners. What impeded that intention? Nothing interfered. I'm used to fulfilling my promises, and I will surely go there. It's another matter to go there under demand or pressure when some people are trying to force this trip under the form of an ultimatum. In such circumstances, the government won't go anywhere. And if we're speaking of real questions concerning not only the coal sector, but the Rostov sector district altogether, in my visit, I'll deal with all the issues needing attention there. I must say that the communication sector sympathizes with the economic demands of the striking miners. The Union of Communication Workers of the Russian Federation support the miners, expressing solidarity with their actions, and communications workers remind them that their difficulties connected with non-payment troubles are easily identified with by the labor unions of the sector. The overall sum of debt to the communications companies providing broadcasting for state television radio programs for 1994 is 242 billion rubles. News from Chechnya. Today, since morning in the Chechen capital Grozny, positional clashes continued. Interfax was told by Chechen military sources. According to their affirmations, at the moment, Minutka Square, October region in the southwest suburb village Chernarechye, are as previously under the control of militarized groups of Jahar Dudaev, and since Wednesday morning they continued to fight back using heavy artillery and mortar launching systems. And there are no casualties reported. However, the Russian authorities recently stated that the Minutka Square was now under control of federal forces. A more detailed review is done by our correspondent Konstantin Tachirin. This morning in Grozny, positional fighting continued. Interfax reported, citing Chechen military sources. According to their words, the October region in the southwestern suburb Chernarechye are under the control of Dudaev formations. According to the same information, the villages Chechena-Ul and Shali, south of Grozny, are being subjected to massive artillery fire. Chechena-Ul, according to the Chechens, is almost erased from the face of the earth. According to Russian military, RIA News reports, almost 80% of Grozny territory is currently controlled by federal forces. Although during the night hours they say control is less reliable, the smaller Dudaev units go out to hunt for Russian military servicemen. So the basic mission of the Ministry of Internal Affairs forces in Grozny is to clear the locale from gunmen who penetrated the city blocks or didn't manage previously to break through the blockade circle. General Ivan Babichev reported on the situation in Chechnya to the headquarters of the air paratroopers forces. He noted that his units have fulfilled their mission and are preparing to be replaced by Ministry of Internal Affairs contingents. Incidentally, these replacements have been spoken of a long time. Nation against the military personnel who refused to fight in Chechnya. More than 100 criminal cases have been filed. Information continues to arrive on humanitarian aid. From the Czech Republic today, 11 tons of medication were sent by plane, and the most extensive cargo being sent to Chechnya by the Cossacks of Stavropolye is wood for heating field hospitals, which is interesting. Stavropolye literally has no timber, so for the firewood, obviously artificially planted strips of shielding forests are being donated. It's difficult to believe it, but in this rubble, people still live. There are not that many here, maybe 30,000 or a little more. No one knows for certain. Among them, there are Chechens, Ingushetians, but the majority of them are Russians. Those have remained who had no money nor place to go. And so they crowd in basements or in lower stories of buildings. The fact that there are no creature comforts doesn't intimidate them. The most terrible thing is that it's cold in such places and they grow faint from hunger. We haven't had water for 1.5 months. We use water from a fire hydrant which was installed 25 years ago. Many of them would have very much liked to leave Grozny, but without help from the outside, they won't be able to do that. Their hope is on the military. The people are ready to leave even in trucks, if only to get further from war. Today, a rumor circulated about the ostensible imprisonment of the Major General Babichev by Dudayev formations and as well the deputy head of the Territorial Department of the Federal Organs of Executive Power in Chechnya, Mr. Gantimirov. We were told in the Ministry of Defense of Russia that this does not correlate to reality. Soldiers' mothers are assuming a more active position regarding events in Chechnya. These films we received from the city Novomoskovsk in the Tulsk district. Today, a special Congress of the Soldiers' Mothers convened. As is known, the first Congress was held in April of last year. Events in Chechnya demonstrated that the demands expressed by its participants toward the government and the Ministry of Defense basically were left unattended. Today, issues are far more urgent. In the auditorium, apart from mothers, representatives of the Ministry of Defense, generals, admirals, workers of the military prosecutor, participants of the Congress are preparing an appeal to the President, the government, the Minister of Defense, and the Prosecutor General. And in Moscow today, they spoke about one more very serious problem which surfaces in connection with events in Chechnya. The territory of the Chechen Republic in the near future could be a source of a serious epidemic threat. So feels the chairman of the Sanitary and Health Control of Russia, Yevgeny Belayev, who recently returned from Chechnya. It would be mildly put if I described the sanitary epidemiological situation as unsatisfactory. In Chechnya, it is close to urgent. Now, sanitary services have recorded increased levels of infection and confirmed the presence of conditions for epidemic outbursts of cholera, diphtheria, and even possibly the plague with the warm season of the year. The water supply system has been disrupted. The population uses water from open sources. Many immigrants live in hordes and in unsanitary conditions. Lice infestation among them is about 100%. Natural centers of the plague are showing great activity. In Chechnya, there are 3 in the last years. Anti-epidemic measures were not undertaken. These sanitary services almost didn't function. Now everything possible is being done to implement it, but this process is complicated because of the continuation of combat. Tragic events at times have a surprising side. Interfax reported that a gathering of the authoritative figures of the criminal world from various parts of Russia occurred in Petrozavodsk. At the professional gathering, they said that the war in Chechnya distracts big money from the illegal cash flow. The Minister of Internal Affairs of Karelia has confirmed that he has information on the financing of Chechen gunmen by criminal gangs. And about journalists, the representative of the American Committee in Defense of Journalists feels that the coverage by Russian sources of mass media of the war in Chechnya is to be truthful. And today, journalists were awarded. How to provide reliable protection and guarantees to journalists in hot points and in the complicated circumstances of our daily life today. This was discussed in the Moscow House of the Journalists today. The reason for the roundtable meeting was the awarding of those journalists who distinguished themselves in the reporting on the Chechen conflict, among whom is our journalist from our agency, Natalia Prokofieva. All of them were deemed worthy of the award of Moscow, the Moscow Union of Journalists and the Military Insurance Company. The latter gave 4 of them, among whom is our reporter Mikhail Zotov, received insurance policies of 25 million rubles each. The company is actively involved in social support for Russian military servicemen, veterans, and invalids, and as its leaders assured, is prepared to work with the journalist collectives. In the opinion of the leadership of the Moscow Union of Journalists, this is extremely important because the work of the reporter and the professional demands remain in the sphere of higher risk. In Chechnya alone, 7 people died, 17 were injured, and there is a need for immediate measures for social provision and protection of the labor of journalists. There were several appointments today. Boris Yeltsin today, through his decree, appointed the 45-year-old doctor of juridical sciences, the Professor Mikhail Krasnov, as the aide to the President of the Russian Federation. Prior to that, he had been an assessor for another aide of the President on national security, Yuri Baturin. In the entourage of the President of the Russian Federation, they feel that Krasnov will be delegated the task of juridically developing the legislative initiatives of the head of state and legal acts being adopted by organs of state rule of Russia. One detail. Recently, the candidacy of Krasnova was submitted by the president for the post of a member of the Constitutional Court, but was not supported by the Federative Council. And further, Boris Yeltsin signed also a decree today to appoint Sergei Belayev as chairman of the State Committee of Property of Russia. To date, Belayev had headed the Federal Department on Bankruptcy. The lower chamber of the parliament today was off. A break was announced because of the civil requiem for the deputy Skorochkin. According to Interfax, the investigation is pursuing various versions of Skorochkin's murder. One of them is connected with his commercial activities. Another version is being built on motives of revenge. In the Duma, in connection with this murder, political battles are flaring up. This morning in the Duma, Vladimir Zhirinovsky made a political statement. Never in the history of parliamentarianism had there been such a case that in one parliament, over the course of 9 months, there were 3 deputies killed. The political nature of it is in the fact that not a single murderer will be found, neither the first, second, or third victim. On behalf of the faction LDPR, Vladimir Zhirinovsky demanded the resignation of the internal minister Yerin and the chairman of the Duma Rybkin, whom he accused of their inability to provide for the safety of the deputies. The LDPR leader was not sure the Duma would support those proposals. Therefore, he threatened the faction would refuse to take part in the session, and he executed his threat during the examination of the amendment to the law on mass media. The LDPRs demonstratively left the auditorium. The amendment to the law on mass media was submitted for examination by the Duma for a second time after the president of Russia had declined it, resorting to his right of veto. The chairman of the committee, Mikhail Poltoranin, connected the declining of the amendment by the Duma with the démarche of the LDPR faction. According to our regulations, we can return to this text and introduce an amendment as a new law. But I think that we will seek a solution. The Federative Council today rejected the law adopted by the State Duma on governing the arbitrary courts. The chairman of the corresponding committees of the Federative Council, Kostoyev, doubts that the current parliament will be able to form an entire judicial system. It's no secret for anyone that a latent election campaign is in full swing. It's easily observed at the many press conferences which are held in the State Duma. In the State Duma, the chairman of the Committee on CIS Affairs and Ties with Compatriots, Konstantin Zadulin, and the chairman of the headquarters of the International Congress of Russian Communities, Dmitry Rogozin, at a press conference drew the journalists' attention to the problems of compatriots. More than 25 million Russians are living in the near abroad. In Zadulin's opinion, the tasks facing public organizations today in defense of the rights of the Russian-speaking population on the possibility of their return to Russia have no constructive solutions. Without reintegration and the reunification of the former USSR republics while observing their rights to sovereignty. I, with great satisfaction, note that the political forces, which in many ways, many of them are directly responsible for resolving the past which made our compatriots abroad, today decided to find task fellows in the countries of the new abroad and are attempting to organize themselves politically. I'd like to call for vigilance regarding the initial aims of the organizers. The book presentation held today, entitled I, Peter Romanov, implied to the journalists that in the event of the victory at the elections of the Bloc of Patriotic Forces, the President of Russia could become a fan of Peter the Great, Ivan the Terrible, Ivan Kalita, a man who out of arithmetic operations prefers addition and multiplication and relates poorly to the dollar and the course of Boris Yeltsin. Admitting that he's lost his faith in the strength of tomorrow, the member of the Federative Council, Peter Romanov, yet predicted the imminent death for internationalism and Russia inevitably becoming a national state with a nationally oriented economy. In the 127-page narrative, which begins with the words, "My name doesn't permit me to do otherwise," the author tells of his life's path, discusses Russia, and offers the readers to make a choice, if not in favor of the Tsar, which incidentally Peter Romanov feels is not timely, then at least for a manager which the country needs. And now, what is being done today in the Russian government and what decisions are adopted there. I'll preface the report of Natalia Chernyshova and inform you the foreign debt of Russia is $120 billion and we are owed $147 billion. This sum applies to countries who, in essence, are incapable of returning their debt. The examination of a seemingly narrow circle of questions of the forecast for Russian foreign economic activity exposed an entire spectrum of Russian problems, from purely economic to completely moral questions. Although the results of the foreign economic ties, unlike other departments, were successful for 1994, as the Vice Premier Oleg Davidov stated, the foreign trade turnover compared to the previous year had increased in 94 to 7.2% and Russian export by 8 to 4. At the same time, this problem is of sectoral ministries. The basis of export still is raw materials. The portion of energy resources is 44.2%, and that is almost Russia's limit. Regarding scientific electronic equipment, it doesn't stand up to competition of developed countries. Therefore, the grown volume of import basically consists of foods, consumer goods, and automobiles. Currency influx has increased significantly by almost 66.5%. However, according to the Customs Committee, $5 billion is not returned to the country, which is explained by the dishonesty of certain domestic exporters. Therefore, it's necessary to tighten currency control and establish stricter measures. It's interesting that today the Vice Premier Zaviruha stated that this year Russia will sell 3 million tons of forage grain abroad, which is, as is known, is in short supply to feed our livestock. Also previously, we heard reports about purchasing the same fodder grain. And about problems common for the Commonwealth of Independent States. Preparations are underway for the summit, which is planned for the 10th of February. At the summit in Almaty, possibly the question will be raised on extending the capacity of the Russian president as the chairman of the CIS. Tomorrow's summit, opening in Almaty, the heads of the states of the CIS, will be an important landmark in the life of the Commonwealth, which already has 3 years of history, perhaps not quite glorious or logical, because only a few years ago there was no firm conviction that the CIS would survive. Many decisions and resolutions still remain on paper. The last 3 years have indicated that mere conversations or talks or at least desire to agree to fraternal closer ties, or at least mutual beneficially cooperative ties, but in the framework of the Commonwealth was not enough, although the integration process yet is gaining force. This is the result of creating an economic union, developing a legislative basis, but the main thing is the realization that integration is unavoidable, although defining its tempos and scales is the right of the member countries. Moscow and Almaty, meanwhile, have already ripened to demonstrate an example of multilateral integration to other countries of the CIS, whose delegations tomorrow will begin to discuss the agenda. And now about two-sided agreements. Another round of Ukrainian-Russian talks in Kiev ended today. The results of the talks was the initialing of the draft agreement on friendship, cooperation, and partnership, and the signing of 6 agreements of military, technological, trade, economic, and border nature. The sides also signed a declaration on the Black Sea Fleet, which foresees a gradual division of the military marine fleet and the possible basing of Russian military marine forces in Sevastopol. We have completed the entire program connected with preparations for the visit of the President of Russia to Ukraine. That is a mutual success. And those issues which demand two-sided relations have been singled out of the draft law. Removed from the draft agreement was the posture on dual citizenship. This problem will be resolved in a separate intergovernmental agreement. Today, the head of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Andrei Kozyrev, refuted rumors about Russia's intention, so to speak, to swallow Belarus. One more quote: "Integration has no attitude to empirical policy," said the minister. From Tallinn, they report that they do not intend to join the CIS structures, not now nor in the near future. This is information from Interfax from the Foreign Affairs Department of Estonia. Yet they are interested there in expanding economic ties with the CIS countries. From the Baltic region, we received correspondence also about the meeting of the presidents of the 3 countries, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. Guntis Ulmanis, Algirdas Brazauskas, and Leonard Merry opened a training center for the Baltic Battalion of the UN peacekeeping forces. Here, under the supervision of specialists from Western countries, training is underway for volunteers from the 3 Baltic states. At the meeting, the presidents discussed the political situation in the world and problems of unity and security of the Baltic states. They also discussed issues of border crossings, customs control, the criminal situation, and illegal refugees. Rumors surface and are refuted with astounding speed. In the press, the dismissal of the Minister of Defense of Estonia was reported. Our correspondent reported refuting information today. In allocating the property of the Russian army which remained in Estonia, from time to time serious scandals would emerge. The last of them erupted within the Ministry of Defense itself when the minister, Entuk, not completely illegally, wanted to hand over to a certain joint stock company 3 military objects which belonged previously to the Russian army. The minister was reported by his deputy, and the Prime Minister, Andris Taran, consented to the dismissal of the Minister of Defense from the post he occupied. But at the very last moment, the Premier was forced to reconsider because before parliamentary elections, only 3 weeks remained, and for such a short period of time, there was no point in replacing the Force Minister. Perhaps considering the bitter fate within the Ministry of Defense, the Premier undertook such a decision because over the last 2 years, Estonia had exchanged 5 ministers of defense. As chairman of the Ministerial Council in Poland, recommended instead of Waldemar Pawlik will be the current marshal of the Sejm, Józef Oleksiy. This agreement, as the press were told in the corridors of Polish government, was reached during a nocturnal meeting of the leaders of the government coalition, the Union of Democratic Left Forces, and the Polish Peasant Party. This meeting was convened because of a political crisis in the highest organs of power of the country. As we've already reported, the resignation of Pawlik's government is pursued under the threat of suspending the parliament by the president of the Polish Republic, Lech Walesa. Now Yugoslavia. That decision of the Croat leadership, despite the protests of the international community, recently confirmed again the UN peacekeeping forces by the 31st of March must leave all the territories officially belonging to Croatia. From eastern Slavonia, the battalion of the Russian paratroopers must withdraw. The heads of the eastern sector of UNPROFOR have already a plan to withdraw the forces, but our battalion will have to leave in the opposite direction. Residents of these territories are certain that after the withdrawal of Blue Helmets, the war between the Serbs and Croats will resume. Today, in Krina, the capital of the self-proclaimed Republic Srpska Krajina, at a special meeting of the parliament, the Skupština, the national emissaries are discussing possible repercussions of withdrawal of peacekeepers from the zones of contiguity and even the new peace plan of the Z4 group, according to which the UN forces should remain in these regions for at least 5 years, after which the Serb Krajina is offered to remain within the framework of Croatia and disperse its army. This stalemate situation is because of the fact that Croatia agrees with the Z4 group plan, but insists on the withdrawal of the Blue Helmets, and the Krajina Serbs categorically disagree with the plan, but demand that the peacekeepers remain. At last night's meeting, the Security Council again urged the Croat leadership to reconsider its decision from the 12th of January on not extending the mandate to the UN forces. Possibly soon, they will have to discuss the question of completing the mission. It's difficult to say whether Zagreb's demand is final. For many months already, the Croat army is arming itself vigorously, but not without the aid of some former Soviet republics. 4 Turkish F-16 planes, without warning, appeared in the eastern part of the Aegean Sea, violating Greek airspace. Immediately, from Greek military airports, airplanes lifted off into the air, which, having established surveillance over the Turkish destroyers, did not initiate an operation to stop them. During the return, one of the Turkish planes fell into the sea because of technical malfunction. The service personnel of the Japanese airport Kansai were bewildered while inspecting the plane, which arrived from Singapore. On its fuselage, 2 gaping holes were seen, and the tire was ripped open. As it happened, the tire burst occurred during takeoff, and the burst was so strong that flying particles bored holes in the body of the plane. Neither the crew nor the 109 passengers noticed the accident, and the jumbo Boeing 740 completed the 5-hour flight, risking falling apart in the air. In a transition to the market economy, very popular in our country among children and adults, as well as the famous game Monopoly. So today's anniversary possibly will attract the attention of many of our viewers. Rich Uncle Pennyback, by ringing the bell at the New York Stock Exchange, started the celebrating of the 60th anniversary of one of the most popular and favorite world's games, Monopoly, which appeared during the Great American Depression. This game conquered the hearts of millions in the world quickly, and in 60 years, in 45 countries, more than 160 million copies of the game were sold in 25 languages. As is considered the secret of success is the excitement which grips the players, and the idea of earning and at the same hour disposing of an entire estate. Today, some of our compatriots who have already made their money are attempting to invest it into art, and such things do happen. Have a careful look. Such varied works: Krasnopevtsev, Nesterov, Nazarenko, Yulian, Alexander Rukavishniky, Bulgakov, Osetnikov, Grichina, a constellation of names gathered together. The works of these artists compile an expressive portrait of the art of the era of the end of the 20th century, with its troubles, the premonition of cataclysms, and simultaneously resorting to eternal themes. Nature is the joy of life. Meanwhile, in our country, since the beginning of the century, recognized leaders of innovative art still have no contemporary art museum, and the Mars Gallery has begun to build it on Khmelov Street in Moscow. This, in our difficult days. How is it that they decided? This idea came to us from our despair. We're attempting to prove that in any situation, one must be decent, first of all, and also we must do something so as not to decline or regress into something. Therefore, we're attempting to create this museum, and we will. Money for the construction is insufficient, and all the works gathered in the halls of the gallery, the artists handed over without recompense. Paintings, sculptures are exhibited for sale to collect funds. It's very joyous that in each person whom we've met, we've seen a response to a good effort. And no matter how much is said that people have become hardened and cynical, and because of the difficult economic situation, they've become more evil, I will never believe it. In actual fact, it's not so. The time has come to thank you for your attention and to give the word to the sports commentator Oksana Polonskaya in a moment after the ads. All the best. Good evening. Briefly about the main sports news which we have at this hour. At the match of the contenders for the world title in chess, which is underway in India, Karpov and Gelfand in the second match ended with a tie, and their overall scores 1-1. Kamsky beat Salov in the delayed first match and is ahead 1.5 by half a point. In Switzerland, at the world freestyle competitions in Mogul, Sergei Shuplitsov is in second place. In first is the Frenchman Edgar Graspiro. Yet Shuplitsov leads in the overall count of the tournament. And now news from the National Hockey League. Here the regular matches were held. An eighth victory was held by Pittsburgh, this time over Florida, 7-3. This is Pittsburgh's eighth straight win with only a one-game tie. Chicago has one less victory after beating Anaheim 3-0, and Detroit, which also beat San Jose with a dry score 6-0. One of the more stubborn matches was the one between Vancouver and Edmonton. Here the score was 4-4. Tennis news at the San Jose Open tournament with a relatively small prize purse. Andre Agassi, who is the number 2 seed in the ATP rating and evidently is competing for the first, easily beat the Italian Fernando Melicini. A more prestigious tournament is underway in Dubai, where the author of the sensation is Goran Ivanisevic, who lost to Andre Gaudense in the first match. From other results, I'll note the victory of Wayne Ferreira, whom our tennis players will soon have to meet in another round of the Davis Cup competitions. He has beaten John Fitzgerald. Good evening. Tomorrow, an enormous cyclone over the south of the Barents Sea will continue to affect the north of the European part of Russia. In Karelia, on the Kola Peninsula, in the Arkhangelsk district, in the Nenetsk Autonomous District, in the Republic of Komi, it will remain cloudy with some patches of snow blizzard and winds gusting up to between 15 to 20 meters per second, temperatures from -3 to 8. An atmospheric front connected with that cyclone will influence the weather of the Ural area and the central Volga area. Here it will bring cloudy weather, snow, blizzards, and winds up to 25 meters per second at night, -5 to 10 during the day, -1 to 6. In the northwestern part of Russia, in the Baltic countries, the Kaliningrad district, it's mostly clear with some patches of brief snow. In the morning, the temperatures will show -5 to 10, in some places down to -15. During the day, -2 to 7. On the coast of the Baltic Sea, as high as +5. The same weather is expected in Belarus and the central area. During the day, -2 to 7. In Moldova, Ukraine, and the central Chernozem areas, the Rostov and Volgograd districts, there will be the influence of an atmospheric front on all this territory. Tomorrow, the weather will be unfavorable with some patches of snow and blizzards, with snowslides and icy road conditions, -3 to 8 at night, during the day -1 to 6. It's warmer in Moldova and in the south of Ukraine at night, around 0, during the day as high as +6. In the Krasnodar, Stavropol, Rim areas, Kalmykia, the Lower Volga, and the northern Caucasus republics, an anticyclone's influence will be felt from the Mediterranean Sea. Here, often the sun will peek through during the day. It will be as warm as +3 to 8 on the Black Sea coast of the Krasnodar Rim area, as high as +10 degrees. In Chechnya, Ingushetia, and Dagestan, it's cooler. At night, -1 to 3, with icy road conditions. During the day, +2 to 4 degrees. In St. Petersburg, cloudy with some brief periods of snow at night, -10 to 12, during the day, -4 to 6 degrees. In Moscow and suburbs, variably cloudy weather with some patches of snow. Winds are northwesterly, gusty 7 to 10 meters per second. At night, -8 to 10, during the day, -2 to 4 degrees. The forecast was compiled on the data of the Oceanic Meteorological Center of Russia. All the best.
The news from Moscow is produced each night by Russian National Television and is broadcast to citizens of the former Soviet republics. You can see this newscast Tuesday through Saturday mornings at 2 Eastern Time.